This is the second meeting. The first meeting was the one with Dov Kenin, who was not only one of the founders of Standing Together in Israel, but also co-author with Dani Filc of the book What to Do Now. So the book in its big version was published in 2019, and here on a tiny tweet from 2022, I also have a tiny version that Dani discovered in Van Leer Institute in 22 when Dov Kenin brought it to him on the day when the sinister government was confirmed in Jerusalem. So it was quite an adventure since then. Unfortunately, many things we had some hope at that time, despite everything that was going on. I think that the situation right now is much more difficult. But I'm not going to speak about it. You are going to speak about it. I'm just going to tell everyone that you have several domains of expertise. And the one I first knew when I was at the University of Ben Gurion in Beersheba was your work in the inequalities of health. So this is these are two of your books. You have many other publications, articles, and other things on all these issues. So you don't like inequality, in particular in health. And it's also because you are a medical doctor. This is not something that everybody knows. Although yesterday, thanks to a tiny short movie shared on the social media, people know that you are a doctor too. You have been working on the populism. So hopefully we are going to talk about populism too today. I think that you make some interesting distinctions that haven't been made by other researchers. So we are looking forward to hear more about it. And then you have some other domains of expertise like Tintin, for example, in comic books. So this is something that I could not read really because I don't read Hebrew well enough, yet I see that you did publish on that. And then you published, of course, on many other issues. I'm not going to mention it here. Okay, so this is for the official introduction part. You are a professor at the University of Ben Gurion in the Negev, in the famous or unfamous Department of Politics and Government, which were very much discussed for years and years because of its revolutionary character. Your work in the political arena is also well known, and we would like to know much more about it. So we really look forward to understand what is exactly your place today and what was your place a few years ago in Israeli political arena. So please, Dani, first, let me thank you really so much for being with us. This is wonderful, and I'm moved for many reasons by the fact of your sole presence here. But I would like to know, what are you doing for Standing Together? What is your place with Standing Together? How did you start to work with this decent organization? How did you start to work with Dov Kenin? And also, what is your relationship with the Meretz party you have been close to, I think, some time ago? So please, Dani, the floor is yours. And thank you, everyone, for being with us.
Thank you, Anna, for this so generous introduction. Okay, so in following the 2015 election, there was among the center left and the left, there was a feeling of frustration and sometimes even a kind of resignation to the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu was once again elected prime minister. And once again, some of the polls before give some hope that he would be defeated. And so there was a kind of very, very, very bad mood among center-left and leftist activists and supporters. So we began to meet people coming from the Communist Party, from Hadash, the Communist Front, or the front headed by the Communist Party, people coming from Meretz, people coming from human rights and civil society NGOs, and in order to think, okay, what can we do different? Because doing more of the same, it's not helping. And we thought that there is a need of an organization that in a way fills the void between NGOs, which are very much professionalized and usually are not mass organizations, and political parties that, at least since the 2000s, maybe before, have become much more personalized and active only around elections and not social movements as they were, at least social democratic and communist parties in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s of the of the 20th century. So that was the idea. And as a good leftist, it took us a lot of time of discussing and thinking together. And then in September that year, I'm speaking about 2015, there was what was called the Knives Intifada, which were acts of individual opposition using knives against the occupation, and those individual and quite sporadic acts opened a very, very dark wave of racism, anti-Palestinian racism in Israel, focused also on Israeli-Palestinian citizens. So after talking and thinking a lot, we decided to take the streets, and that was our first demonstrations, and that was the creation of Standing Together, where I think that what differentiated us from other movements and political parties was the idea that we understood politics as a struggle for hegemony. We thought that there was that in fact, vis-a-vis the hegemonic project that the right wing promoted, the alternative, there was no really leftist alternative in the Israeli society. There was a liberal left alternative, but that was not capable of coping or of giving answers to that could break the demographic character of this liberal leftist camp, which was mostly the professional managerial class, mostly Ashkenazi. So that was the idea. And we thought that we need a grassroots movement based mainly on activists, but offering different kind of activism to different people. And since 2015, we are trying to present an alternative that is able to present a different hegemonic project. It's not easy, and I can't say that we have a lot of successes, but we have also a lot of let's say, lack of success, and probably we'll talk about it afterwards. And also things changed a lot after September 7th. So concerning my role in Standing Together, I'm part of the national direction. We have we try to be as democratic as possible. We have a national direction where when some of the representatives are elected at the National Assembly that takes place one every year and a half, every 2 years, and the rest are representatives of the different circles that compose the movement. and this body elects this body is in charge of the most significant political decisions, and there is a more executive body that is elected among these people, and that we are between 15 and 18. It depends when. And I am part of also this national secretariat. So that is my role. I am the oldest member of the secretariat by far. We are a very young movement. And so that's that's my role. And as I was telling you, I think that differently from other leftist parties, on the one side we differ from what was Meretz in the past, and the Labour Party, in that we are much more Jewish Palestinian, Israeli Palestinian movement. We define ourselves as socialists and not as liberal. We try to broaden democracy to other areas, and we differ from the Communist Party in the fact that we are much more interested in speaking with the Israeli society, in trying, both the Palestinian and Jewish societies, trying to find the common grounds and the common interests, and even the common affects, which for sure since October 7th is a much more challenging task.
Dani,
okay.
thank you so much. Maybe just one question to react on what you just said. Standing together seems to be at a very thin border between a movement of activists and politics. And I wanted to know, how do you conceal the both? And I want to come back as well on the term of hegemonic project. You said that you want to change or to offer another hegemonic project. And I guess that there is a connection to the grassroots movement and the hegemonic project. So if you can just develop on this idea. But just to say to our marvelous audience that you have the possibility to ask your questions in the chat. And if we have time, you could also ask directly questions to Dani. But first, let's try question in the chat. Thank you.
So in a way, and here I don't want to be too academic, but I would say that in a way our project is a project of radical democracy. Radical democracy in the way that many years ago, people as Ernesto Laclau and Chantal Mouffe defined radical democracy. And that's the reason, Eliaou, that we aim to be also internally democratic and not only democratic outside. And this radical democracy is based on the basic belief in equality among people, and equality must express itself in the socioeconomic area, in ending the occupation and building a just peace based on the rights, individual and collective, of both peoples, the Palestinian and the Israeli people, and also equality in terms of gender equality, LGBT equality, addressing inequalities within Israel based on ethnicity, like, for example, between Mizrahim and Ashkenazim. So in a way, I would say that our hegemonic project is based on the idea that equality is equality is equality. You can't promote equality in an area without extending it to other areas. I think that would be the core of the project. What I mean when by this being an hegemonic project is the idea that contemporary politics are based on trying to transform a vision of society, a project of society, in such that it appeals to as many people as possible. And the idea that in contemporary politics, there is an element of consent, which is central. It's not only oppression. I'm sorry that I can't address all the chats. It's difficult for me both to read the chat, the questions in the chat, and trying to make myself.
Don't worry.
Don't worry. We will read it.
Okay. So what we tried to do is to find, and I think this is also a presumption, in a way, grounding our kind of politics, that most people in Israel, even those that today support more rightist solutions or more rightist politics, could be part of an hegemonic project sustaining equality, if it takes into account their feelings, their needs, their fears, and that we have to address those fears, and not and we don't. One of our biggest efforts, which is complicated in current situation, is trying not to be a moralizing left, an accusing left, but a left that combines interests, that brings together different groups based on common interests. Because once again, our idea is that most of the Israeli Jews, most of the Israeli Palestinians, and most of the Palestinians in the occupied territories, in fact, share the same aspirations concerning themselves and their families and their communities. So I think that, in a nutshell, that is the kind of politics we try to put forward. As I said, it's not easy, and I won't tell a tale of success, but I think that if in 2015 people ask us, who need another movement? Why do you want another movement? I think that today people are aware that we are the biggest grassroots movement in Israel, both left and right, and for sure we are the most active movement within the center left and the left. Now, concerning politics, Eliaou, and I try to, we think that at least we are not speaking about party politics at the national arena, but we did enter institutional politics, the city level. We have a representative in the Tel Aviv City Council and one representative in the Haifa City Council. We have representatives at the different universities, student unions, and there, in those kind of places, we speak about politics, a leg inside and a leg outside, trying to combine the work that can be done by representatives of the movement within institutions with the work that the movement can do, with the combined work that the movement can do as a grassroots movement. And for example, in Tel Aviv, that I know better because I live there, so we have the city movement, which is not standing together, but city, it's We All Are the City, that's the name, works together with our representative in the city council, and democratically the grassroots group picks which kind of struggles the movement wants to put forward, and the representative becomes the speaker of those, and in a way the one who promotes those politics within the city council and within the institution. So that would be our idea of politics, once again, not at the national level, at the city level, student unions, and a very, very, very big challenge for us, which has been in a way, we hadn't invested in it all what we should because of the October 7th and all what happened afterwards. But an important challenge in that sense would be workers' unions. But it's more for the future, unfortunately.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for this. You really need to explain us exactly what you mean by the notion of hegemony. We know that there is Gramsci behind it, but also Chantal Mouffe and Ernest Laclau reading Gramsci. So just please give us the reasons of your choice of this notion, which is not transparent for someone who is not reading those writers on daily basis.
Oh, okay. So yes, the idea is that in a way, many of us come from some sort of Marxist background, but as Laclau and Gramsci read Gramsci, Laclau and Mouffe read Gramsci, it's an attempt to overcome some kind of class or economic essentialism and explaining politics in terms of classes that probably today are not, or the class structure today, at least in Israel, is very differently from the class structure that classical Marxism analyzed. So politics, and in politics there are subjects, collective subjects, that cannot be reduced to class subjects. So that was, and the idea of hegemony allows us for understanding struggle for power in unequal societies, in stratified societies, in a way that takes into account the different collective identities that people share. And hegemony is a situation in which a certain model of society, a project of society, becomes accepted by a significant sector of the population, becomes, as Dov Henin, my colleague and friend, uses to say, that a social project becomes hegemonic when it becomes common sense and every alternative becomes nonsense. But hegemony is not only a system of beliefs, but it's based on structures, on organizations, on institutions. Now, currently, and for at least 20 some, even 30 years, there are there has not been a real hegemonic force putting forward a real leftist project. As I understand it here, I make a caveat because this is, here I'm not, and up to now, I think that more or less I represented the consensus within Standing Together. What I'm going to say now, it's my interpretation. I think it could be accepted by comrades at Standing Together, but it has not been discussed. So I don't want to present it as the movement stand. But I think that in the last 15 years at least, since 2009, more or less, there are two main hegemonic forces or two main hegemonic projects struggling for hegemony in Israel society. One is the right-wing populist project that is headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, and in the last 3 or 5 years has built an alliance with fascism, with straightforward fascism, and the other alternative project is the one put forward by what you could call the liberal camp in Israel. And unfortunately, both camps share, while they differ in a lot of aspects, but they share two main elements. One is some kind of acceptance of neoliberalism as the only game in town, even though the populist hegemonic project is a much more heterodox form of neoliberalism than the liberal project. And the second one is that they don't challenge Jewish supremacy within Israel or within the occupied territories. And so we think that we need, and the project that we want to put forward challenges both elements. And also we think that, as we can see not only in Israel, but unfortunately in other many places, plain liberalism is not the best way to face right-wing populism. Plain liberalism is in many ways blind to the reasons why people support right-wing populism, and usually they try to cope with right-wing populism by shouting louder liberal assumptions instead of trying to understand what didn't work in liberal democracy, that in liberal democracy in neoliberal times that gave place to the expansion of right-wing populism. I think that in Israel, since October 7th, and maybe even since the attempts to juridical reform, the populist project that Netanyahu headed since 2009 up to the pandemics is becoming less populist and more fascist. And as it is becoming more fascist and less populist, it also is becoming less popular. And we can see today that not only the polls for a year and a half show that if there were elections in Israel, the current government would be in a minority, but in most issues that are today discussed in Israeli society, the government policies are supported by a minority. So, paradoxically, insofar as they are aware, and they are aware that they are becoming a minority, the authoritarian deviation becomes a stronger temptation, and we are seeing that on these days, including, unfortunately, the fact that Israel broke the ceasefire and went back to war, also as a way to trying to defend or to save this this project that is becoming, as I said, more messianic and more fascist as times go by.
And this return to the war is obviously not popular according to the polls. And we see with the letter of the recently published 2 days ago of the Shin Bet head, right, saying that apparently he really thinks that the current war is in the interest of Netanyahu and is going to last for that reason.
Yes, and we know that today some 50% of reservists are refusing to go to the army. That's not an ideological refuseniks, but in fact is probably I think the main hope to stop the war,
sure.
and that's one of the reasons that our current call is we say no to the war. We refuse the war because we would want that society will make much more clear that we won't fight Netanyahu's war.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for this. I'll give the floor to Eliaou because I know that he has questions. But just to sum up what you said from a super theoretical point of view, because I know that some people might still be slightly uncomfortable with the notion of hegemony. So please note, for those of you who don't have it in mind, that this notion was introduced by Gramsci mostly to make the notion of ideology more robust and more sophisticated. So it becomes, it's a part of Marxist heritage, and it designates the whole superstructure that is of ideas of and of institutions, as Dani said, that shape the representations and shape the desires of given community. And so in this sense, there can be a conflict between two hegemonies. So exactly as Dani explained, but hegemony here means only the system, a coherent system of representation. So a word that is quite close to the word of ideology, right? Is it completely absurd what I'm saying?
No, it's not absurd, but once again, I would say that hegemony is, for sure, ideology is an important part, and there are people reading Gramsci that think that in fact Gramsci put Marx upside down, and where Marx read infrastructure, Gramsci read the superstructure. I think that it's a little bit different. I think that there is an institutional and a material level or ground
Sure.
for that ideology that represents, and there is an interaction between the material and the ideological levels. I think I will try another way of defining. I would say that hegemony is both the process and a state and a status in which a certain way of distributing power and resources in society gets accepted by a majority of the members of that society. Insofar as it is a process, it's also always challenged by an alternative hegemonic project, and the focus is on social collective agents. In the sense that it's a status, the focus is on institution, and it's the stabilization of the project. And I think that what defines Israeli society in the last, I would say even 20 years for sure, the last 15 years, is that there is no project that has been clearly hegemonic. Netanyahu has managed to win once and again elections, but his project has not become hegemonic and is challenged by very significant groups within the population. And in fact, the struggle around the juridical reform since this government was confirmed in November, December 2022 and up to October 7th is an expression, and the massive protests, etc. I think that express this idea that what we are facing in a way is a hegemonic crisis. An hegemonic crisis can be defined as that period of time in which there is no single project of society, no single model of society that it's able to gain relative consensus.
Dani, if I can just bounce back on what you just said and maybe react on the question that I can see in the chat. You are speaking in your book, Malasot Arshav, about solidarity. And now you spoke about equality between Israeli and Palestinian, equality between the different communities. And you are emphasizing the idea of support, equality, collective identities. And it's also, as you just said, complicated to imagine that some part of the Israeli society will be agree with your ideas and with your new hegemony. So, for example, if I read the question of Kenneth, he or she is asking about it's hard to see how you hope to connect with the circles you described there. She speaks about the illiberal forms of religious Judaism, for example. So you have a branch of religious Judaism that wouldn't be agree with you. Or, for example, we have the question of John, or excuse me, from Aliza. Aliza, she's asking, um, yeah, excuse me, it's David. Not easy with right-wing dominance of social media, channel 30, 14. It's hard to imagine that you can conceal left socialist group with right-wing and also the religious dimension in Israeli society. If you can just develop on this idea.
Okay. Those are challenging questions. I think that when we are speaking about building consensus, we are not speaking to trying to delete differences. There are projects that we are clearly opposed to them. Right-wing populism, clerical fascism as represented by Ben-Gvir, and religious national fundamentalism as represented by Smotrich and his party, or radical nationalism mixed with conservatism as represented by Forum Coelet. Those are ideological and political enemies. We don't want to build consensus with them. We want to build polarizations of the Israeli society that put those groups in the minority and not in the majority, not by compromising with those groups, but in a way, but by modifying the ways in we speak with society, not by denouncing, but by showing which are our common interests and showing that those projects do not represent the interests of the majority of Israelis and Palestinians. So that is what I would ask. It's true that in many ways there is a relationship between between religion and right-wing messianic positions in Israel. But this is not an essential characteristic of religion. This is the political result of processes that began with the 1967 war. In fact, until 1967, the Religious National Party was more moderate than the Labour Party in dealing with the Israeli Arab and Israeli Palestinian conflict. The National Religious Party, for example, voted against going to war in 1967. So the transformation, so there is nothing essential in religion that demands religious people to be right-wing. There has been political processes that built a Jewish religion in Israel as the ground for radical right messianic positions. But those processes, since they are political processes, can be changed. We don't think that biology is a destiny. I think that we learned that from the feminism, that biology is not destiny for sure, it's not political destiny. So we think that, and for example, there is an attempt by another movement with which we share a lot of work together, which is called the Small Emuni, religious left, or or the left believers that are trying to show that there is a religious alternative to messianic, to clerical fascism or to messianic religious nationalism. So once again, it's not about compromising with right-wing ideas. It's about trying to break the complete alignment between certain social groups and certain ideologies and political projects. And we clearly do not believe on the claim that Israel is divided into tribes, that once again is like saying, okay, biology is destiny. We are convinced that those so-called tribes are political constructs and not essential, primordial, or biological creations.
And do you think that you can develop a bit more about the shift in 67, why the religious groups and communities, they began more and more messianic, they began to have a project messianic afterwards?
I'm not an expert on religious Zionism, but there was a political project of a group at the beginning. It was called Garin Gachelet, the Gachelet nucleus, that began to put forward this much more nationalistic and messianic vision, and they were able to I think the euphorics following the 1967 and the occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, that in a way promoted or strengthened those religious messianic feelings, beliefs. But you have to take into account that the first declaration supporting what was called then the Great Land of Israel was signed by people coming from the heart of the labor movement, people as Natan Alterman or Yitzhak Tabenkin. So it's a more complicated process, and we must be sensible to the historicity of those processes and not taking what happens today as something that was there always or that it will always be there. I think that once again, if as somebody who comes from a Marxist background, it's clear for us, for me at least today, that history has not a telos, has not an end point, has not a pre-order or a direction that we can read from here, that it's it's leading to the communist revolution. But in the same way, we can say that history is open and that we are not sure that what we have today will be there forever. And in a way, and that history is constrained by structural constraints, is limited by structural constraints, but is open to collective agency. And in that sense, I think that one of the slogans that were among the first we put forward, the idea that where there is struggle, there is hope, is coherent with this view of history as open for human agency.
Thanks so much for this. I see that many people in the chat are asking about the opportunities to help somehow the movement. So you have an invitation to Latin America to speak in Spanish, because obviously you do speak Spanish for obvious reasons. You were born in Argentina. But also people would like to know how to help from abroad. How do you think we could help from here? This is a question that was asked also to Dov Kenin a few weeks ago. So we would love to know, how do you feel about it? But also in this context, I think that maybe we would like to know more about how the movement might become slightly bigger, maybe not becoming political, properly speaking, because apparently there is this good there is a set of good reasons not to become purely political, but how this movement could become massive, like Podemos, for example, and in this context, how we can help from here to make it as big as other movements, and maybe a little bit more stable than Podemos. And I'll just add this idea of the presence of this idea according to which only the military defense is a way to defend Israel, which is quoted stated in the chats critically, of course, by Martin. But I suppose that our aim from here, and tell me what you think about it, should be maybe to make the Israelis, Jews and Palestinians alike, feel safer, not feel attacked. So how can we shape our discourse from here to help our discourse and also other actions from here to make you feel that we are on your side, and you, of course, you need the army, but it's not only the army that is going to make sense of your view of international future of Israel, etc., etc. So yeah, kind of big question, but with many aspects that I hope correspond to the questions that were asked.
I'm not sure I will be able to answer all the questions, and a quick answer to one of the questions Eliaou posed before, and I forgot to answer okay, what happens with the right-wing management of social media, the 14th channel? Once again, I think that one of our basic beliefs and assumptions, and I don't think that it's a religious belief, is that that all of us are a mix of rational and irrational choices, that our political choices, our political beliefs are a combination of rational and irrational elements. And there is a tendency among the liberal camp in Israel to think that they are the rational and the other side is the irrational. And I think that it's self-defeating, because you can't convince people if you believe that they are being irrational. And we think that people have the possibility to decodify messages in the social media. I'm not saying whole people, but many people. And the fact is that notwithstanding the Channel 14 and notwithstanding the social media, since October 7th, and it's increasingly so, the government positions are minoritarian. So people are able to decodify messages according to the reality they feel every day. They can read a lot of messages in Channel 14, but if their partners have been for a year and a half fighting a war that it's clear that today its only reason is the combination of maintaining power and putting forward this messianic nightmare of conquering the Gaza Strip again and getting rid of Palestinians, transferring them or killing those that don't want to be transferred. So insofar as people are understanding that, they are changing their political positions, even though those speakers in the social media are making the same claims that they did 2 or 3 years ago. And we should take into account that between 2009 and 2019, for many Israelis, especially among the popular classes, those were years of economic bonanza and improving their economic status, their access to services and consumption, and that influenced their political choices. And on the other side, what was called the government of change that replaced Netanyahu in 2021 and 2022 was the most neoliberal government since Netanyahu's period as Minister of Finance in 2003. So we should take that into account, and self-criticism, understanding the limits of the liberal camp in Israel, is much more productive political than blaming Channel 14 or blaming the Netanyahu's bots as responsible for that. So that is, I forgot answering Eliaou's former question. Now, concerning your question, Anna, that's a tough one, but I think that once again, what we have, there is no military way to assure Israel's existence, not only in the long run, but also in the mid run. In fact, there are between the river and the sea, there are some 8 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians, and most of us can't or won't go from there. So the only real alternative for most of us is a just peace. And I think that that would be the message that can make people feel understood and defended, as you put it, Anna, sharing this idea that there is no military solution and there is no decolonization, in a sense that millions of Jews will leave to their country of origins, because for many of them there is already no country of origin. So the only possible solution is one that takes into account the interests of both peoples, and I think that message is what should unite your voice outside Israel and our voice in Israel. A second point is that that I think that you could that you could be of help. One of the problems, even now, there is a slight majority of Israeli Jews, and for sure all Israeli Palestinian citizens, that still support, that still are against the annexation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And one of the problems, at least for Israeli Jews, that oppose the annexation, is that they were convinced by the Labour Party leaders, as Ehud Barak, that there is no Palestinian partner for a peace process. So I think one of our tasks is trying to show that there is a Palestinian partner, and I think that outside Israel, you can do a lot to make that occur and make that believable. It seems to me, I'm sure that there are a lot other ways in which you can contribute. I'm just as I said, I'm not sure that I can give a very good or broad or a full answer to your very challenging question, but I think that those are two ways in which we can be part of a common struggle.
If you can, thank you, Dani. If you can develop a bit more about the Palestinian side, as you just said, the Palestinian partner, finding a Palestinian partner. When we interviewed Dov Renin last time, he was saying that standing together is for and foremost an Israeli movement, which means an Israeli Jewish, Arab, Palestinian, all the different identities that you can find in Israel per se, but was less involved in the Palestinian side, because standing together needs to let the power, let the voice from the Palestinian side. So how do you imagine helping, supporting the Palestinian population from the Standing Together movement? This is my first question. And we ask also to Dov Renin what he was thinking about Marwan Barghouti, for example, as a supposedly leader of Palestine. Thank you.
Well, concerning the first question, the way in which it's the last thing we can do is to be in an unconscious way paternalistic. The best way we can express solidarity with Palestinians is fighting the occupation, is fighting the current government, is fighting the war. That's our role. That's our role. That's our role as Israelis. Our role as Israelis to deal with our terrible government, is fighting fascism, is fighting right-wing populism. That's our role. We do hope to build common struggles with Palestinian organizations and Palestinian collective subjects. But once again, that is once we are able, but our first task is struggling against the occupation and against the war within Israel. Concerning Marwan Barghouti, it's clearly, at least as the polls show, the most popular Palestinian leader. I think that Israel should have released him a long time ago. Fortunately, I don't want to be disingenuous, so I won't claim that I hope that this government will release Marwan Barghouti. I think that I don't think that it would be wise for us to Israel to lead the struggle for the liberation of Marwan Barghouti, but I think that there should be an international movement claiming for his liberation as the most representative and most popular and most, I think, most legitimate leader of the Palestinian people. So I think your question connects in a way with Anna's question. Another point that you could try to lead is a kind of international voice claiming for Marwan Barghouti's release from prison.
Wow, that's strong. That's interesting. Thanks a lot for this. We have been talking for an hour, so we thought that 1 hour was going to be enough, but I think that there's still several questions. So if you don't mind, let's have another 15 minutes and then we will.
If people don't mind, I don't want to impose myself on anyone. So
we are absolutely delighted to have you here. So what about Palestinian leaders from Palestine, not only from from Israel, Israeli leaders, but Palestine. So we spoke about Marwan, but are you somehow in touch with anyone? And also, did Marwan speak with anyone from the movement? Like, is there anything?
No, it's impossible to speak with Marwan Barghouti because he's isolated. So that is impossible. We didn't do it until now. We are trying now to build some kind of links with Palestinian civil society organization and leaders. It's only very, very, very in its beginnings. Together with that, there are a couple of very interesting, more general initiatives that that we support, but are much broader than standing together. For example, there is the El Kadwa Olmert initiative led by Nasser El Kadwa and Ehud Olmert, first one, past foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority, Ehud Olmert, former prime minister, that are putting forward an initiative supported by Israelis and Palestinians to build on the idea of a two-state solution. And there is also Ayman Udeh, who is leading an initiative trying to build a joint voice of Israelis and Palestinians. And I think, and we for sure support all of those initiatives. And I think that we also, we need synergy between the initiatives and not competition. So when we do things, we must be very, very careful not to put energy on something that competes with existing initiatives, but trying to learn the ways in which current initiatives can be more energetic, can achieve broader support.
Thank you. I had a very naive question because it's the end of the interview. Tomorrow, if I counted well, it will be exactly 1 year and a half that the 7th of October happened. And we are falling in this infinite wave of despair. And I wanted to ask you if you have something positive, optimistic to see in the future and that you can share with us.
Yes, I think that at least from the Israeli side, my ground for optimism, and once again, Gramsci took from Romain Rolland a very, very good quote, the idea that we have to face reality with the pessimism of rationality and the optimism of the will. The pessimism of reason and the optimism of the will. So, but I would take Romain Rolland and Gramsci one step forward, and I would say that we need to ground optimism of the will on some kind of real ground, not to be too voluntaristic. And I would say, I think that for me at least, the ground for hope is the belief that, once again, is grounded on empirical findings, that there is a significant difference between the place where the Israeli people are and the place where the political leadership is. Even now, Shaul Arieli, who is one of the most staunch supporters of a two-state solution, and he has done a lot of research, he's a researcher, he showed us in a meeting of Ayman Udeh's initiative, he showed data that even now, after October 7th, there are almost 2/3 of Israeli society that opposes the annexation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and either supports a two-state solution or supports a kind of separation. I don't think that separation is the alternative, but at least there, if on the other side, 90 among 120 members of the Knesset voted a declaration against the establishment of a Palestinian state. So there is a clear cleavage between the place where the political leadership is, either for ideological conviction or for lack of civic courage, and the place where a significant part of the population is. And those numbers can even increase if there will be people within the political system that will be courageous enough to express their support for a Palestinian state and for the end of the occupation, and if there will be once again a kind of international environment that will provide an answer to the false assumption that there is no Palestinian partner. So that for me is the ground for optimism. Now, once again, I spoke about pessimism of the reason. The next year and a half until the next elections could be very, very, very bad. Very, 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 very bad times, because it's really possible that insofar as this project, this mix of right-wing populism and fascism understands that it becomes minoritarian, its authoritarian character will deepen, will increase, and thus I'm not optimistic for what will happen in the next year and a half, but history is much more than the next year and a half. So those are my grounds for optimism, and once again we see there is ground for optimism in the fact that so many reservists that a year ago were ready to volunteer for war now are saying we won't go anymore. And once again, I'm not claiming that most of them are saying it from moral reasons or for pacifism, but when we are speaking about politics, we are speaking about not only about high moral ground, but about interests, about fears, about feelings, and the fact that this is the situation means that there are limits for how far this radical right government will be able to take Israel and the region.
Thanks so much for this. There are so many questions that just popped up. I know that we know that standing together does not take positions in the area of one-state solution, two-state solution, etc. But could you share your own feelings about it? So what about one or two-state solution, as far as you are concerned? And also, what about the law of return for all? How do you feel about this? So these are the questions that people have been asking, and also there were several plans of several parties or people that were quoted in the last few months. Is there any plan that that you like the most, or you think that is the most interesting? The Arab plan, for example, for the end of the war.
Well, I would divide between the immediate plan for ending the war and the Arab-Egyptian plan. Seems like the more sensible and more feasible of the plans to end the war. In terms of a more midterm, long-term solution, I personally very much identify with the land for all, one land for all solution, which speaks about two states, but with open borders and a possibility of interchange of people along the border, and not two states with a very, very clearly separated, very clear and tough separation. I personally, but once again, this is not the official position of Standing Together. I personally think that after October 7th, the idea of a one-state solution, even though it can be a hope for the future, is really not feasible in the short or mid term. So once again, in the immediate term, I think that personally that the Egyptian Arab proposal is probably the most sensible, and after some kind of solution based on the two-state solution, but with open borders and with this idea that it's more than a question of where you draw the border, this idea of a land for all that is expressed by Eretz Lekulanu in Israel. But once again, this is my personal opinion. This is not, I'm not representing here Standing Together. I think that I represent most people, that most people in Standing Together that would identify with what I said, but I can't, I would lie if I would present it as the movement's stand on this issue.
Thank you so much. I think we will end on this positive note. And once again, thank you so much, Dani, for your talk and great reply that you offered us. Thank you to the audience that asked a lot of questions, and there are still a lot of questions that we didn't answer tonight. But you have to come back, guys, to the next session with Hula, Dawood, and Alon Lee in 3 weeks, if I'm not wrong, Anna?
3 weeks, yeah. 27th, I think, of April. Everything is on the website, and you will get the email with confirmation and reminder.
Once again, thank you. Many thanks, Anna and Eliaou, for organizing, for having me with you. Thank you all for participating. And I've managed to quickly read a question about Peru and Mexico. And yes, I'm a native Spanish speaker, and I will be glad to speak with people there. So my answer is, if I read correctly the question, so my answer is positive.
Wonderful. So please write directly to Dani or to us, and we'll transfer the email to Dani himself. Thank you so much, everyone, and see you in Beersheba soon, hopefully in a peaceful environment.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.